Hey everybody, it's Brad Linder coming at you again with another sketch card of the day. Got one from my buddy Brant Fowler from the last Ember press. And this was going to be this is a really cool book. It's an indie book. We're going to switch it over to uh, the page here in the channel real quick, and we're going to knock it out. I'm going to have a little fun with this one and help a fellow indie creator, small press creator, whichever one you want to call it. And we're gonna get this going because he had a Kickstarter back when I did this card originally, and I told him I colored up in the series to share it with everybody so that we could get a little bit of exposure out there for him because it's a cool project. Javier, thank you very much for making it on, buddy. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for hanging out with me. I know it's so late in the evening here, and got a couple of smudges here of graphite that I don't want to have come out, so I'm gonna change those. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get this done on this this neck piece and this collar here and get her flesh colored in, which tonight I'm using the wedge end of a E11, which is the basic flesh color for Caucasian skin tone. So it is a base color for it. I like to use an E00 as well for the ladies because it has more of a rose type of color. But you know, you got to go with whatever works. And she is a little more tan than most of the characters that I work with, so that's fine. You know, she's got that tan, that young, youthful tan in the sun look. So I like to add that for her. But some of the characters, it seems to be, you know, that's something I can talk about real quick, is some characters are colored in comics by age, and the older ladies that are in the comics, you know, in their 30s plus, that range, you know, that 30 to 50 range, they tend to get a lighter skin as they want to look more mature. And the reason is in our society, women stay on the inside out of sun and tend to go from there with a lot of that. So it's it plays par for course, but you know, I think it's a little stereotypical as well, because I think it should go for whatever you design the character to be, not necessarily just, you know, because it's traditional methodology by you know, traditional comics and whatnot, because a lot of the stuff that worked back when that stuff was created as the format doesn't work now, but a lot of it still does in contrast too, though. So you have to be careful and pick your battles. But that's something to think about when you're doing a character. You know, what type of personality do they have? What kind of lifestyle do they have? What kind of personality and profile combination do they have? And it goes back to that, you know, I know I repeated that there, but there's a reason for that, because it plays hand in hand, and a lot of people don't do that, and then you end up falling short and making, you know, a character look out of sorts. And I don't want to say a character out of character, it's a contradiction, but it's a character out of sorts with their familiarity of who they are and what they are. And you have to go into that range and say, okay, this is the range I want to go into, this is where I want to go, that's the scheme of things I want to run with, and get it handled. You know that before you go down and put ink on the page, because then you'll know where you're at. I'm using reference from the comic book itself because I've never done this character other than this card, and that's the reason I like to use the reference. But before I came on, I looked at her references and got her color schemes, and, you know, went in with whatever I needed to. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute before I go after the E13 toning. Now, on her hair, pretty much the same thing is going to happen here. We're going to take a YR09, which is the closest thing to the orange that's in her hair that I could get a hold of, and with, you know, in a marker. So I'm going to go ahead and use it, and I didn't want to do this digitally, so I am always doing these by hand for practice, which is what the series is for. And hopefully it entertains you guys as well. But I just wanted to use this one because it's the base coat. Okay, she has a fiery hair. Whenever a fiery colored hair job going on, whenever she goes for her engaging her powers, which she is a pyro, and she's a pyrokinetic. And what ends up happening is that when she uses it, the edges of her hair get flame-like, and they don't catch on fire. They just turn. I don't want to say they go Medusa style. You know, they don't come to life per se, but it's the air and the essence around her that causes the flame. And because she's in that self-contained air pocket, it makes her hair flow and float. And that was something I talked with Brent about beforehand. You know, when I did the card originally, I was like, why does her hair do that? You know, why is it hovering? Is it a fire starter thing? And he said, because it's because of the energy that builds up around her in the air pocket to make the flame that she has as her power. It's coming from the surrounding environment. So that would be a weakness for this character. Unfortunately, as cool as it is, it would be a huge weakness for this character as well, because if you put her in a vacuum, she's going to be screwed. And that's a technical term, mind you. But anyway, it's one of those things where when you see all this stuff going on, you have to investigate what the practicality and what the physics are behind it. And in her case, it happens to be that the air vacuums around her, swarms in, and gets close to her and ignites in a speeding pace. So that's how she makes the fire. Unlike Pyro from, say, the New Mutants or X-Men from the Brotherhood, he only can control the fire. He can't start it. He can't create it. And that's one of the best things about this character is she can actually start it. So, and I know this is an homage to Stephen King's Firestarter, which I really dig as well. And, you know, Drew Barrymore back in the original was awesome. And they're rebooting that as a new movie. And, you know, like they did with It, they're doing a prequel story. And I think they're doing a hard reboot on Firestarter, though, because there's not much of a pre-story to it. She's, you know, she was in the moment. It was there. And that's the way they went with it. But we get to see all of that really cool stuff happen in modern time with modern effects and all that good stuff. And it'll hopefully do it justice, you know, without coming off and saying, you know, okay, we're just going to throw $1 million remake out there, big deal, you know, and that's one of those things where they say, you know, the original's better because the effects just aren't matching up, and that's 100% true in some cases. So we'll find out how it goes. You know, some things just shouldn't be done. They should be left alone, and I totally agree with that. And I'm not biased because of the fact that I was around when the originals came out, you know. But what I'm saying is that if it can be upgraded and improved, awesome. But if it can't, then it should be left alone. And I mean, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite here because I use a lot of public domain characters. And, you know, a lot of characters like that in my Firestorm universe, and I don't want to sound like a hypocrite here because that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they shouldn't be redone. I'm just saying be sure that if you're going to put in the time and investment to redo it, that it is at least as good or better than the original. That's my argument, okay? I see so many people come in and say, well, I'm just going to create this because it's public domain. I think it should be remade. And it's just like, why? Why? What are you going to do better? Oh, I'm going to pour in, you know, $50 million difference and make the effects better and use modern effects. Okay, cool. What about the story? Well, how are you going to revamp the story? Are you going to take it, you know, from the original, or are you going to make it something, you know, twisted and really unique? Because that's my argument. And, you know, in comics, I use a contrasting version of the original in my own Firestorm Comics universe, and a lot of people don't do that. You know, they use the character as it is, and they don't want to do the adaptation. They want to do the original, and that's fine, you know. But for me, it has to be something unique and an original take on it to make it pull the story down the way it's supposed to be. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So, hey, Paul, thanks for coming on, man. Now, I'm going to switch over to this. Before I do that, I'm going to wait. I've got a RV29, a crimson color, and I'm going to use it on some of the middle ground. But first, I'm going to go in and do her top because I want to let that have time to set. So we're going to go right in here and do this. Yes, I know I'm very brave for doing this with a wedge. It's like, you're crazy. You're doing that with a wedge. Yeah, I know. The chance of coloring her fingers blue is pretty much going to be a 100% chance if I keep doing that. So I'm going to go to the finer tip before I screw it up, because that's not what the show's about. I don't want to steal Jim O'Reilly's, not the way to do it, you know. Don't do it this way is his new kick. And I think it's awesome that he's doing that, because it's funny. And Jim is awesome as an artist, so I dig a lot of what he does. And I don't want to take his spiel. I don't want to take his spiel. So we got that going on. I missed a little spot right there. I'll have to get that. But yeah, I'm just kind of highlighting this real quick with a blue. I'm going to leave it alone at that. And this will contrast the hair very, very well. So we're going to leave that alone. That's it for the moment. Now I'm going to grab this orange again and go back in here and catch. Boom, 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 boom. Done. And now right there in that corner, I'm going to catch that other shoulder and other collar. Boom. Done. And now I'm going to come in with the RV29. Like I said, just going to run through one side, through the middle, and across, and kind of make a contrasting point. Nothing too big, nothing too fancy, just contrasting for the tone. A lot of people go in and, you know, say, well, you got to manufacture the highlight, and you've got to manufacture this and that and the other. With hair swishing around like this, you can do it wherever you want, because that shows that there's motion in the hair. And the more random you're able to do it, the better it'll actually look. And I will argue that tooth and nail to anybody. And the reason why I say that is because of the fact that with this hair moving the way it does, you can't go in and just say that it's contrasting by being there for this, that, and other, okay? It's not just one-sided. It's not one note. It's not one point. It's everywhere. And the reason for that is because of the fact that light's hitting it from different angles, okay? So don't let anybody tell you that you have to do it specifically a certain way when hair's twisting around like this, because it's not true. A lot of people will be formal about it, and they'll be like, well, you know, you're not supposed to go with this technique and that technique and, you know, that basic. But the thing is, though, this is something that is very forgiving in that regard, because of the fact that you can get so much out of it by being sporadic rather than having to hold it all down, okay? That's a huge thing. It's a huge freeing bonus, because what happens then is you can go in and do this any way you see fit by getting all this stuff colored up and just move it around and get it done and get out of there. That's what I say. That's what I say. That's what I say. Now, I'm going to tell you firsthand, this is exactly what I do. That's why I'm doing this. And a lot of people will argue that point, and that's okay if you disagree. But I'm telling you flat out, my method is to come in and highlight and contrast as many colors as possible in motion, okay? And I see this all the time in comics where it's like flat on one side, and it'll just be all boom across the bottom. It'll be darker. And it's the whole thing because of one light source. But with the hair that I have here, you could see 20 different light sources this way because it's all doing this. And I want it to do that, okay? Make it do that. Make it come to life. Because I'll give you a little tip, okay, that nobody pays attention to. Todd McFarlane is not, I'm going to say it, Todd McFarlane is not the greatest artist in comics, okay? But he was an innovator and still is till this day, an innovator. He's a genius when it comes to innovations for making stuff look cool graphically. Now, he is a graphic artist. But like I said, he is not one of the best comic artists because his style, if you look at it, is really gritty and dirty. But the thing is, though, whenever he would storytell and make the graphics, he would hide those gritty points behind the effect of something in motion constantly. Go back to his old Spider-Man stuff. Google it. You can find it all over the place. You can find them for sale in eBay if you want to pick them up, or graphic trades or whatever. That's all cool, right? But check out what Todd did. And what made him famous was because of the fact of his graphic design of making things in motion. Because if you ever remember, previous comics were always one-shot motions, and it's like you have a shot, boom, you're done, you're on to the next panel, boom, you're done, you're on to the next panel, boom, you're done, you're on to the next panel. His stuff had people facing off. Spider-Man and Kraven, for example. And I'm moving to an RV09 now for the hot pink shading in this. Now, what I'm saying about Todd was Kraven was a big character in his run. Venom was a big character in his run. The Lizard was a huge, massive, consistent character in his run. He had many, many guest stars because he didn't want to just draw Spider-Man. And I didn't blame him for that. I thought that was a great ploy, and he did a lot of crossover stuff to get them to cross the universe a lot quicker than most of the stuff happened prior. Because if you think about it, they weren't guest stars prior to that. But we'll stick to one point right now. To handle the guest star thing, the reason he did that is because he wanted to draw all these other characters and get other work, but didn't want to have to give up Spider-Man to do it, but didn't want to have to draw Spider-Man through every issue. So what he would do is had a ton of guest stars. The reason he had a ton of guest stars like that was because of the fact that when he came in with these guest stars, he got to draw all that he wanted to. Now, he did that, and it bypassed it creatively. It bypassed the regular process of what in Marvel. It bypassed, plain and simple, the old team-up. Until then, they had crossovers or Marvel team-ups once in a blue moon. He was one of the guys that made it regular where these guys would guest star in other books and move across. I mean, you would have like Frank Miller do a crossover with Spider-Man or the Punisher or something like that once in a while. Daredevil would show up once in a while. If you needed a lawyer, they would mix it up that way. But they were major crossover stories. They were not consistent. Okay? Then he comes in and says, okay, this is what I want to do. And guest stars about every character you can possibly think of in the Marvel Universe and brings them in as permanent cast, where they just cross over, no biggie. And it had never been done before. I mean, a lot of comics did cross over, of course, don't get me wrong, but like I said, primarily they stayed in their own books or were for special appearances and were marked that way as guest appearances. And they just weren't regular characters, but he made that famous so that he could draw the characters he wanted to draw. Now, then in regard to the actual artwork of what I'm talking about here specifically is where Todd would go in and like I said, his stuff wasn't great. If you look at it technically, he's lucky he got a job. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Todd's, but I'm being realistic. And I mean, the man will tell you that himself. But realistically, his style was not up to par in a lot of cases. And to hide that work with the gritty look and whatnot, he would go in and put in motion in everything and make it graphically sound. And that's a different thing than drawing the comic itself. And I know a lot of people will be like, what? But I'm telling you, he was a graphic artist trained formally, and I mean, he still is because he's still alive. But that's the thing with Todd. He went in and used his graphic art skills to refine comics and make them cool and make them slick and make them sexy, you know, and make them hip and make them popular. And he did that because of the fact that he could with the skills that he had. So keep that in mind whenever you see these modern things. What's your voice? You know, because Todd would go in and say, okay, this is the thing. We're going to look at this. And, you know, I don't want to draw 1, 2, 3, 4 panels. And he would go in and draw off whatever. I went over the line here, so I'm going to make a couple of corrections. But he would go in and just make it all different things. You know, he'd say, I don't want to draw 1, 2, 3, 4 panels. Let me draw this. And I like to do this as well. If you can't draw as strong as you need to, go in and do something cool with it and change it up. And by that, I mean go in and make it have motion, make it have detail, make it have emotion. Because if you ever watched, watch Todd draw, the things he was going to do is put the lizard in there and put, you know, he would have, let's look at an example real quick. We would have Spider-Man here, and he would be facing off, let's say, against, let me draw an example here. And I know this is crude, but it is what it is. So we've got Spider-Man here. Here's his back. Here's his shoulder. and he's looking at whoever, and you would have Craven. This is one of my favorite scenes. You would see the zombie Craven standing here, just boom, and down around his legs, we'll put his pelvis up high here, and we'll put a leg in here and hit leg in here. Now, in this one famous shot in the Spider-Man series, there was this shot with the lizard down here, big grimace and teeth. We'll put his mouth divide here, an eyeball here, an eyeball here. And then the cool part is he was strode behind here, and his tail was wrapped up around the leg of Craven. So he had motion going on, right? So when you have that motion going on, what would happen would be the tail was moving, so that's one. Then you have number two, which was Spider-Man being perfectly still, Craven being perfectly still, just smiling at him in his zombie face. And then you see all these little things like this going down through the page. And guess what that is? That's water. And anytime you have a significant scene in anything, film, comics, books, whatever, it's what makes us up, water. And we have a primal connection to the earth with water. So a significant thing. Spider-Man kissing Mary Jane in the first Spider-Man movie. It was in the rain. Spider-Man losing his marbles and getting the Venom suit, taking him over in Spider-Man 3. When he was stuck on the building, what did it start doing when it took him over? It started raining. Think about that. Because that's what we have to look at. So I have to grab a gold over here for Ember's eyes. Now, that's what we're looking at. Think about it. Todd wasn't the best artist in the world when he drew Spider-Man, but the thing was, he was consistent, and he always put in motion. See, she's standing perfectly still, but you can tell what's going on because of the fact that she's standing that still, and that motion is in her hair. So you know something's about to happen. That's one of the greatest things you can do in comics is make motion while standing still. A lot of the other scenes you would see, Todd would come in and have these great scenes with all this cool stuff going on. Excuse me. And you would get to see these great looks from these books going on, and you couldn't figure out why. Well, I stopped to examine that fact, and that's when I discovered that he did these awesome motion plugs. Is what that's what I call them, for lack of a better term. I call them motion plugs, because what he does is he goes in and he puts in the wavy hair, he puts in the tail flickering around. Even though Spider-Man's standing still or Craven's standing still, they still get that great look because of the fact that there's still motion going on. One of my favorite ones is where he's in a fight scene and everybody's beat down. Spider-Man's about to be just pummeled and pulverized, and the Rhino's in it. I think it was in the Amazing series. And Spider-Man's on the ground, and it's in this warehouse. And all you see is this great smoke coming up out of nowhere. And that's the big motion scene for it. I mean, Spider-Man's beat down like he's about had it. Rhino is menacing, standing over him. And I think Calypso is in that one as well. And it's a huge, massive, dark scene, and the only thing you see is these trails of smoke going across. If you can make motion while standing still, you've got something going on. Look at this picture and think about that. That's what this book does. The guys have done a great job with that, and like I said, it's an homage to Firestarter, and if you can do that in comics, you can do that in life. And fellow marketers that are paying attention to this too, if you guys are out there speaking, put motion in everything you do, put story and motion in it, and it'll come to life for you very, very easily, and it'll knock it out of the park. It really will. So that's that fun thing. I thought that'd be a cool tidbit to talk about today to help you guys out with that. But, it's anything in life. When you're talking to people, give them motion. Don't just stand still. When you're drawing for them, make sure your stuff moves. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect artistically. Get it as good as you can, of course. You want to do the best you can and give 100%. But if you can't get it to work out, if it's just not melding together for something, make sure motion's in there, because that's something my comics always have for that given reason. because of the fact if you have motion in it, there is no denying that, okay? No denying that. I'm going to put this right here with this collar she's got going on. It's a fancy little hip choker thing going on there that the character wears on occasion and a couple of things. And I thought that would be cool. So with this one, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take another color. Let's do an RV04. This is called a shock pink. This will be very bright like a highlighter. So I think this will be very cool to go all the way to the edge of the character and just glide that around and make that pop. So with that said, though, like I said, I just wanted to show you guys a little bit about that effect as to why her hair moves, because some people ask me, when I was drawing this, why is she, what's the deal with the hair? Is that, a young Medusa or what? And she's called Ember, and she's a fire starter, a fire kinetic, and that's one of the things, man. She builds up the pressure of the air around her, catches the molecules on fire, and that's how she creates it. And boom, done deal. And she came out really well. And like I said, this is one of those things where those cards, everybody loves the Medusa card that I did. And like I said, I'm not trying to brag here. I'm just saying that's another example of the one that's in motion. Same thing with the Juggernaut piece that I did. He was stomping in motion through the reader, because I got ripped on by a lot of people, a lot of tech artists that I know professionally, and they were saying, well, why didn't you just go in and, you ran him off the page? Why didn't you just go in and make it a full body shot and make him on the page and, put him behind some rubble or something or busting through a wall? And I was like, no, why? I like it when he goes off camera, because then when he's off kilter like that, he shows up. And they're like, what do you mean shows up? Well, that's a thing for me, I like to draw cutting edge panels, and I like to draw them to where they go off, they're off center, like she's off center. She's not in the middle. The traditional way to do it would be to put her hair as the key component there and balance her out and make sure none of it runs off the edge, I like it when a knuckle runs off the edge or a page, has a foot run off the edge. It's not necessarily traditionally breaking panel, because I know people will go, well, that's just breaking panel. That's no big, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Because I'm not talking about breaking panels. All right, you can break panels all day long. What I'm talking about is camera angles and the contrast and composition in the shot. So I'm working strictly with that angle. All right, I'm not worried about breaking panels and making a foot pop out like Spider-Man swinging at you out of the page. That doesn't impress me. I've seen that, done that. It's old news. What I'm talking about is popping it out because it's in front of a breaking window. You have a character jump out a window. You got the glass behind him. You got the broken frame behind him. You got him coming through the window. Part of him in the window. Part of him out of the window. Part of him sticking out of the frame where he's jumped off the page already and moved on to the next frame, leading you into the next panel. That kind of thing. It's all about composition. So think about that. With that said, I can give you a couple of quick examples here to show you guys how some of this is going along. See how, you see how the rhino is standing there and you've got his knuckles chopped off right here. And, most artists would tell you, especially old school guys, they would tell you, that's wrong, you can't do that. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This is modern contrast. All right, this is modern composition. You cut the camera angle to where it looks cool and gives you a great visual effect. Most people would look around here and you would be looking at him straight on, but instead I turn the angle this way over to his shoulder, where you catch him at an angle like that, and you catch his knuckles out, you catch his shoulder off, you catch part of his back off. Most people would be like, put him in the frame, put his hands, show both hands, show both the parts of his shoulders, both parts of his hands, have everything universal. And it's just not working anymore. Don't do that, because it just doesn't work that same way. Like the Hobgoblin here, same thing, contrasting with the hands being chopped off, not having the full arm in the page. It kind of makes it look a little more creepy and dramatic and forced forward. Okay, same thing there. Another example of that, I'm kind of sorting through the cards here to give you guys prime examples of that. This is one of my favorite ones. right here. The Joker, same thing, glove out of the hand. Most people would say draw it small enough to put the hands in there to where you can have the full hand, because it doesn't show the full image. But you guys get that full impression out of that, right? I guarantee you do. So that's cool with me. That's modern composition, okay? Here's one, Spider Ham. This is one that's really, really cool with that and shows off just like Ember does. This is what I was talking about. The forced contrast and forced composition is way better than a simple panel of just sitting there with everything in place and, looking on kilter with the camera, because the traditional way would have been to draw the background in, shrink him down about that size, about a third of what he is right now, and have his full body in this range to where his chest and head and chest and torso and thigh are. That's about what you would see if I put him in full swing. You'd see both feet, you'd see both hands, you'd see most of the window. You don't want that, right? It's just, modern readers, you look for something shocking. Same thing with the Wasp here. This is like Ember, sort of the same profile actually, but this is the same thing. You got the hand cut off over here, the wings cut off over here. The old school way would be to zoom that in, actually to zoom it out and put it out there very, very small and very tiny, and have everything composed in the frame. Same thing with the Morbius piece. If you guys saw that, and this is the last example I'll use for tonight, but this is one of those things that does this very well, especially in this part, because if you look at where the collar is, this collar goes way back off out of the window of view, of the pane of view, and you can hardly tell where his shoulder and his chest separate. This is his shoulder, this is his chest. Well, the reason you can't tell that is because of the fact of the way I shot it, because I'm like leaning in on his pec right here, just boom, right up across his chin. And back here gives the contrast because of the fact that, this guy, old school, would be shrinking back, show both of his shoulders, show the back shoulder, show the front shoulder, and then show this guy in the background, really, really teeny tiny, in a hole. On the hole, he would be completely there, both arms, both legs, and up on the wall, and the wall would take up about a third of the card. They would section it a little differently. I don't do that. I like modern compositioning just a little bit better. So, with that said, think about that whenever you're doing these things, because like I said, that's the last example I really want to give you right now, for sake of argument's sake. But yeah, you guys check it out. Read the book, see if you can find that contrast in there yourself, and hopefully you learn something a little bit about it. I'm going to call this one done for the night, and I appreciate you guys coming on and hanging out with me as always. You know the rule. We've got this rock for a little bit of time and not for long, but we got to make it cool for the time we're here, plus the time for the next generation. So do something kind, make it a cool place to be, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. That's another one in the book. See ya.